103. This is study session 7. The Nigerian banking and financial sector. Introduction. In this study session, you will examine the Nigerian banking and financial sector. Specifically, you will explore the evolution of this sector and its performance over the years. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to present an overview of the banking and financial sectors in Nigeria, analyze the financial sectors of the Nigerian economy, overview of the banking system in Nigeria. The banking system in Nigeria has since independence undergone radical changes. Banking in Nigeria developed from an industry which at the time of independence in 1960 was essentially dominated by a small number of foreign banks into one in which the public sector ownership of banks predominated in the 1970s and 80s, and in which the Nigerian private investors have played an increasingly important role since the mid-1980s. The banking industry also went through phases of regulation and deregulation. In the 1960s, extensive government intervention characterized the financial sector. This was intensified in the 1970s. The objective was to influence the efficiency of resource allocation and promote indigenization. Since the adoption of the Structural Adjustment Program (SAP) in 1986, the financial sector has been liberalized and measures have been put in place to enhance prudential guidelines and tackle bank distress, according to Ajayi and Ojo 2006. The banking system is the most developed segment of the Nigerian financial structure. To Olalokun 1987, banking system consists of the Central Bank of Nigeria and all commercial banks with a network of all their branches across the country. Based on this last definition, we shall now set out to examine the activities of banks in Nigeria, starting from the apex bank, the Central Bank of Nigeria. The Central Bank of Nigeria. Central Bank, according to Uidlc 1990, can be defined as the only financial institution established and charged with the day-to-day management and control of the nation's monetary affairs, the supervision and coordination of banking and financial activities in the country. No country in the world has two central banks. In Nigeria, the body that is established to perform the functions captured in Uidlc's definition is called the Central Bank of Nigeria. Uidlc went further to state that with the dissolution of the West African Currency Board, which served the 4 British colonies of Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, and Gambia as central bank, Nigeria established her own central bank in 1958. Rationale for central bank in Nigeria. Olashore 1985 noted that following the mushrooming of commercial banks in Nigeria in the late 40s and early 50s, and the eventual collapse of most of the banks with the consequent loss of public confidence in banking, it became inevitable for the authorities to impose regulatory and supervising controls on banks in order to achieve a restoration of public confidence in the banking system and safeguard the interests of both savers and depositors, while at the same time ensuring a balanced management of monetary system for national economic development. Indeed, the above expression aptly captures the need for the establishment of the Central Bank of Nigeria. The roles of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Olalokun 1987 maintains that the CBN performs the traditional roles of a central bank, such as issuing of currency, acting as the lender of last resort, acting as bankers to banks, supervising and regulating the commercial banks, advising the government on monetary and public debt. Commercial banking in Nigeria. According to Ajayi and Ojo 2006, commercial banking activity started in Nigeria in 1872 with the establishment of the African Banking Corporation, which was saddled with the responsibility of distributing Bank of England notes for the British Treasury. They went on to assert that the three first-generation banks had their origin in the colonial period. The Bank of British West Africa, later called Standard Bank and now called First Bank PLC, was established in 1894. The next commercial bank to appear was Barclays Bank Dominion, Colonial and Overseas, now known as Union Bank Nigerian PLC, in 1917. The British and the French Bank, the precursor of the United Bank for Africa PLC, started operation in 1949. Banking regulation and legislation. Governmental control of commercial banks is exercised mainly through the CBN. Commercial banks typically perform the crucial role of mobilizing resources from the surplus sector and directing it to the deficit sector for the purpose of stimulating economic growth and development. Ajayi and Ojo 2006 are of the view that other industries are not regulated as the banking industry. The reason for its tight control include: 1. Since the product of the activities of banks is money, if left unchecked, it can cause irreparable damage to the economy. 2. If uncontrolled, banks can create excessive money and cause inflation. 3. Banks need to be protected from total collapse or distress. 4. There may be need to direct resources to a certain section of the economy, and without regulations, banks may not direct resources to such a sector. 5. Banks are also put under surveillance in order to dispel monopoly tendencies that may hinder healthy competition and hence efficiency of the sector. 6. The sure means of sustaining public confidence in the banking system is to ensure that there are regulations. 7. The initial attempt at regulating the banking industry came through the enactment of the 1952 Banking Ordinance. Functions of the commercial banks. Commercial banks may be defined as financial institutions set up for keeping and lending money to people, institutions owned by individuals, organizations, or government for the main purpose of making profit. Ajayi 1990 stated this. Such banks perform functions that include: 1. Acceptance of deposit from members of the public for safe custody. 2. Lending of money to industrialists, businessmen, and other members of the public in forms of loans or overdrafts. 3. They advise their customers on business matters before giving out the loans. 4. They can act as an agent of payment for those who deposit money with them. Development banks in Nigeria. As contained in the Nigerian Banking Amendment Decree number 88 of 1979, a merchant bank refers to any person in Nigeria who is engaged in wholesale banking, medium and long-term financing, equipment leasing, debt factoring, investment management, issue and acceptance of bills, and management of unit trusts. Merchant banks are also referred to as discount or acceptance houses. Many of such banks have been in existence in Nigeria. Some of these banks still exist, whereas some that sprang up to take advantage of structural adjustment program of the federal government have collapsed following the reversal of the policy program. Community banks in Nigeria. Community banking entails grassroots banking. It refers to self-sustaining financial institution that is owned and managed by a community or group of communities for the purpose of providing credit, deposit, banking, and financial services to its customers. Of bills and management of unit trust. In banking, 3. They advise their customers on business matters before giving out the loans. 4. They can act as an agent of payment for those who deposit money with them. Development banks in Nigeria. As contained in the Nigerian Banking Amendment Decree number 88 of 1979, a merchant bank refers to any person in Nigeria who is engaged in wholesale banking, medium and long-term financing, equipment leasing, debt factoring, investment management, issue and acceptance of bills, and management of unit trust. Merchant banks are also referred to as discount or acceptance houses. Many of such banks have been in existence in Nigeria. Some of these banks still exist, whereas some that sprang up to take advantage of structural adjustment program of the federal government have collapsed following the reversal of the policy program. Community banks in Nigeria. Community banking entails grassroots banking. It refers to self-sustaining financial institution that is owned and managed by a community or group of communities for the purpose of providing credit, deposit, banking, and financial services to its customers based on their credit worthiness and self-recognition. Community banks promote rural development by providing financial and banking services as well as other facilities to communities who effectively have inadequate supply of such services. The financial sector and the Nigerian economy. We shall aptly capture the financial sector of the Nigerian economy and its activities from the annual report and statement of account of CBN for the year ended 31st December 2005. See the CBN release as contained in box 4 of the annual report below. Annual report and statement of account of CBN for the year ended 31st December 2005. The recent banking sector reform commenced with the announcement of a 13-point reform agenda by the Central Bank on July 2004. Summary. In this study session, we have been able to examine the following issues. 1. The radical changes undergone by the banking system of Nigeria since our independence. 2. The definition of a banking system. 3. The need for the CBN. 4. The history of central bank. 5. Traditional and non-traditional roles of a central bank. 6. Commercial banking in Nigeria and how it began. 7. Banking regulation and legislation. 8. Functions of the commercial banks. 9. Development banks in Nigeria. 10. Merchant banks and what they do. 11. What community banking entails in Nigeria. And lastly, the financial sector of the Nigerian economy. This is the end of study session 7. Thanks for listening.